Family is Providence. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm sure you heard by now, Diddy was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Now, let's all be honest, he was sentenced to 4 years for the violence, the domestic violence that he committed against Cassie. If you don't know, the Judge Subramanian, decided very early, ruled very early that he was going to allow acquitted conduct, namely the force, the coercion, the violence that we saw in Cassie getting beat at the hotel and other testimony that was presented in trial. He was going to allow that information, even though he was acquitted of the force and the violence in the sex trafficking. That was going to define the nature of what he was found guilty of, which was the prostitution. So essentially, the judge said he committed these Mann Act violations, transported individuals to engage in prostitution violently, coercively, and so he wasn't viewing the prostitution as just separate acts that happened non-violently, like how Diddy's lawyers wanted the judge to see those acts. And essentially, it wasn't ever testified that those acts were done violently. As a matter of fact, the sex workers that testified and everybody else that testified in the trial said that those acts, those sex acts that were done with prostitutes were done willingly. The judge said, nah, forget about all that. We see Diddy essentially as a violent man. That's his nature. And so all these crimes, we're going to see them as done violently. And so that made the sentencing even harsher. And so he ended up with 4 years. So I think the question everybody's asking is, well, was this deserved? And I think that, well, depending on who you are, you might look at it in different ways. And I think that there are different ways to look at it. I think two things can be true at once, in my opinion. I'm just gonna give you my opinion. Do what we know about Diddy make this 4-year sentence deserved? I would say absolutely. As a matter of fact, Diddy probably deserves more than 4 years if we take into consideration what we know. We know Diddy has been a violent man. Even anyone who's been in hip hop circles know Diddy commits acts of violence. He does so to men and women. There have been numerous instances of this. Hip hop artists, regular civilians, past girlfriends have testified, not just even at trial, but outside and at various interviews, that Diddy has committed acts of violence. And so we know Diddy to be a violent man. There might even been some other crimes that he was linked to. Allegedly, they say he participated in Tupac's demise. And so there's all this shady sort of criminal history that Diddy has, right? We also remember the trial that I think he got in was early 2000s, where there was a gunshots went off in a club. Shine, his former artist, took the fall for that. Sean's even came out and said he took the fall for that. So we know that Diddy has done some things. He's been involved in some things. Okay, so you look at the totality of Diddy's life and you think all the things that Diddy's probably been involved in, does he deserve 4 years of prison? That looks like justice. Probably deserves even more than that. But the reality is, when it comes to law and when it comes to charges and proving charges and sentencing, you got to actually go by the book. Okay. And I think that the judge from the very beginning, let's be real, let's be honest, was never going to compartmentalize the Mann Act violations and say, hey, this is just simply a prostitution charge. Let's go with that. We seen Diddy beat the living daylights out of Cassie. We seen it on film. The whole world seen it. It was disgusting. It would be borderline inhumane for the judge to simply say, you know what we're gonna do? We're just gonna ignore that video. Like, it's unrealistic. Like, technically, he should, because that he wasn't charged for anything violent, and all the force and the fraud and the coercion he was acquitted of. And there was, I forgot what it called, there was a federal new law that was passed that say you can't even consider acquitted conduct, but the judge basically said under Title 18 I can still assess the nature of what he did get found guilty of based on all this other evidence that was presented at trial. So he basically said, look, dude, we're gonna get you for beating on Cassie. That's essentially what this came down to. And that's exactly what the judge did. Now, I will say that Diddy didn't make it easier on himself. There were reports of that he had already booked speaking engagements for next week. I don't know if he had a conversation with his lawyers that, hey, we finna get time served, or I don't know if he was walking by faith. Maybe he just felt like, yeah, we're gonna get this. We're gonna be good. I don't know what Diddy thought, but the fact that he was able to, the fact that he did that, the prosecutors used that against him and said, see, this guy's not serious. See, he thinks that this is just, he doesn't have any real remorse, and he thinks the sentencing is going to be light because he doesn't really think that what he did was serious enough. So he's already booked engagements, and essentially that was dumb. I ain't gonna lie. That was very dumb to have that come out at your sentencing hearing. And the judge essentially said, look, I don't believe that you're remorseful. He even critiqued the letter that Diddy wrote to him and said the tone was inappropriate. So I honestly think that this judge, I don't want to say he was unfair to Diddy, because even in his sentencing, he went below the probation report sentencing that was recommended to him. Like, it was recommended that he do 60 to 70 something months, and he went even below that, which is 50 months, which that's actually, to the judge's credit, that was actually kind of a gift to Diddy, to be honest with you. But in other ways, I feel like he kind of had it out for Diddy and was very clearly going to see Diddy as a violent man, the essence of who Diddy is as a violent man, and factor that in to how he was gonna judge Diddy. But realistically, we knew that was gonna happen. We knew that was gonna happen. So I will say this, Diddy has already served the year. He's supposed to do, I think, 85% of Fed time. Probably can get out a little bit earlier if he does other programs and whatnot. So he's essentially looking at an additional 2 years for what he was found guilty of. Now, I do think that in the grand scheme of things, I know Diddy's upset now. He'd like to go home with his family, and he'd like to go do those speaking engagements or whatever he wanted to do. I heard there were reports that he was planning a comeback tour, whatever. That's probably going to have to wait another 2 years. The reality is, from what he was charged with, RICO, 2 counts of sex trafficking, brother, if he would have got found guilty of all of that, he was going to be seeing something like 50 years. Like, let's be honest. If the judge took 2 Mann Act violations, which people usually get months to maybe a year for committing that, and ratcheted it up to 4 years because the nature of who Diddy is violent and coercive, imagine what would have happened if he would have got found guilty of RICO and sex trafficking and all of that. And then adding in seeing him as interpreting all of that essentially as coercively and all that. What would have happened with Diddy? Diddy was seeing 50 plus. That would have been the end of his life, rest of his life in prison. And so to go from potentially seeing 40, 50 years down to 4, yo, that man got away lightly. He dodged a significant bullet. He dodged a bomb. He dodged a nuclear bomb. Of course, he didn't want to spend the next 2 years in prison. But because of his wealth and status, he was able to put together a fantastic legal team, and he destroyed most of what the feds brought against him. And so this is a win. It's a win for Diddy. Feels like a loss, and there's some things I question, and I do think that, to be honest with you, on appeals, he might even be able to bring the 4 years down to about 2 years. He's not going to totally have everything overturned, because I think the Mann Act violations have been significantly proven. But I think that the judge allowing acquitted conduct in the ruling is a significant appeal strength, and his lawyers have already hinted at the fact that they're going to use that. So he may even get the time down even lower. But even if he does stick with the 4-year sentence and he has to maybe do an additional 2 years because of time served, etc., that's a win for Diddy. Going down from, and mind you, remember, if they prove the RICO, then that says that you've got all your wealth and whatever illegally, and the government would have had access to his assets. So they would have been able to rob him blind, take all his money and all his assets. So he dodged all of that and only ended up with 4 years, which is, going to probably be essentially 3 when it's all said and done. So Diddy wins in the long run. Now, there's still destructive hurt to his reputation. There's going to be, he's lost his businesses, etc. But do I believe that Diddy can bounce back? Actually, I do. As bad as this is, first of all, once you're wealthy and powerful, people will always want to collaborate with you. He's going to eventually do these years. This is what Diddy's going to do. He's going to come out. He's going to become a domestic violence advocate. He's going to do everything he can to prove he's done. And hip hop culture, I'm telling you, man, hip hop culture is already filled with a bunch of scumbags that beat their women. In certain places, certain areas, is he going to ever be able to go back into it? No, probably in some liberal white spaces. They're probably never going to want to have anything to do with Diddy. But hip hop culture, they don't care. They'll say they care because, we're not going to ever say we don't care about violence against women. But let's be honest, there's a ton of misogyny in hip hop culture. All of these rappers, most of these people out here be beating a girl. It's unfortunate, but it happens. And I think Diddy's going to be just fine. He's going to be able to ingratiate himself back into the culture. Again, he's still a wealthy, still influential, still powerful person. And people will even see the sentencing as 4-year sentencing in Diddy's favor. Well, maybe he didn't do anything that bad because he only got 4 years, right? So again, does Diddy make a full recovery? No. And maybe I'm wrong, right? Because that Cassie video is ugly. Maybe he'll be forever canceled. I don't know. I think he beats it though in the long run. So Diddy got 4 years. In the end, while I do think some of the sentencing was unfair, in the grand scheme of things, he wins. And I also think in the grander scheme of things, he got what he deserved. I don't think we can ever be too mad at the fact that, Diddy, you've done a bunch of terrible things. You're getting what you deserve. So anyway, those are my thoughts on this. Providence. Please like, share, subscribe if you enjoyed the commentary. Share your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. And I'll see you guys in the next video.